Hello, heroes. My name is Tom Pounder, and you're listening to a special edition of the YM Sidekick podcast. And I say special edition because we did a Clubhouse session or Clubhouse Room recently, and Mark MacDonald, Ben Stapley, and I, and a few other people, including Justin Nava, got in a Clubhouse Room and started talking about what your church can be doing right now to prepare for Easter. Right now, meaning 30 days or less to prepare for Easter. So what can you be doing right now to get ready for Easter, and how can you be doing it effectively? Mark and Ben, Justin and I all share some insights on this, and I would love for you to take a listen to it. It's a little bit longer than our normal formatted YM Sidekick podcast episode, but it's a great discussion, and I hope you enjoy it. And if you have questions, feel free to hit me up afterwards at TA Pounder on Twitter, or you can email me at tom@ymsidekick.com. All right, and so one last thing before we get into the episode. The audio is not as clear as it was on a regular podcast episode. It's still fine. You can still hear everything, but it's just not as clear, so you might want to turn up the volume just a little bit. So, without any further ado, let's get into the Clubhouse discussion about what your church can be doing right now to prepare for Easter.
So let's get started. It's 12 o'clock now. What we'd like to do is just do this for about an hour and honor people's time. And if you have follow-up questions, definitely connect with Ben and Mark. You can click on their profiles and follow them, and then they have contact information in there. But let's just do quick little introductions real quick. I'm Tom Pounder. I'm the online pastor at New Life Christian Church in Chantilly, Virginia. I've been an online guy for about 5 years now. I've been in student ministry since 1997, so I've got a lot of gray hair. From my own kids, but also from the kids in ministry. But I have a huge passion for online ministry and what they're doing and what we can do. And I know that there's some great opportunities here coming up for Easter. So I'm excited to have Ben and Mark share today. What we're going to do is they're going to introduce each other or themselves, and then we'll get into it. And then we'll also have time for question and answer as well. So, Ben, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself first?
Sure. I'm the Weekend Experience Director at Christ Fellowship in Miami. We have 7 campuses locally and then 10 globally spread across Latin America. I had a chance to serve on the executive team. So I have the thrill of planning, promoting, and praying over our big holiday services like Easter and Christmas. And I'm probably like Mark. I think this is my 20th Easter that I've planned now, being in full-time ministry. So I got a couple under my belt, but I'm here. I'm here to share. But more importantly, I want to make the next 20 innovative and creative and fresh as well. So I'm here to learn, so that the next 20 aren't just a cut and paste from the last 20.
That's awesome. Mark, go ahead.
Well, and I'm Mark MacDonald. I'm a church brand strategist. Also, I'm ordained. I'm a pastor of communication. And I work with churches all across the country and help them become known for something relevant and needed. Now, I call that a thread, and I'll probably mention that a few times, but every church needs to discover what their thread is so that it can call messaging. Unlike what Ben should have mentioned, he's also Canadian, and I'm Canadian, but I live in Jacksonville, Florida. not quite as warm as where Ben is, down in Miami area, but I certainly enjoy the warmth. I've written a bunch of church communication articles. A little over 800 of them have been published, and then I authored the best-selling book, Be Known for Something. And I just can't believe I get to do what God lets me do. I don't work in a local church anymore, but I certainly guide a whole bunch of local churches. And I understand how communicators just wrestle with the amount of work and all the deadlines that are screaming towards them, especially around Easter.
Yeah, Mark and I like to joke that it's a race for both of us to see who can get the farthest south in America. And so, Mark, I'm ahead of you, but Key West is calling for you, my friend. You can make it. You can beat me.
I look longingly at it.
That's awesome. Well, I am happy to be a fly on the wall in this conversation. So what we're going to do is we're going to have Ben and Mark share for a few minutes about some of their thoughts leading up to Easter. And then, again, we'll kind of reset the room a few times and whatnot. So, Ben, why don't you kick us off on this as we get closer to Easter? What should we be doing?
Yeah, this is, again, trying to give us opportunities to actually execute things, right? Not pie in the sky and non-executable ideas here. And I know we have listeners, we have people in the room from a range of churches, mega, medium-sized, and smaller churches. That being said, with the time we have, and regardless of your size, the two biggest things that we can still get done is to have a clear next step and a clear next series. So oftentimes, right, and this is, I'm kind of preaching up right now. This is a note for lead pastors, but they'll give a phenomenal resurrection message, but they might not necessarily land the plane. Okay, that's a great. I've been a part of these Easter services where you hear the fact that Jesus loves you and he's died on this cross and he's been raised again, and then go in peace. And there's never a call to action, never a next step to do something with that resurrection story. So that's the first thing. You have to give people a next step. The easiest, basic one is an invitation to salvation to respond to it. Some next level steps would be being baptized. I've seen a lot of churches do this live, right? So you got saved. The next step in your faith is baptism. We got a tub in the lobby down here in Miami. We got a tub outside. It's gorgeous out there. We want you to get baptized. So what's that next step? And then beyond that, what's your next series? And this, again, I'm trying to give us applications for different size churches and also, more importantly, doing it for on-site and online. So the other application for both of that, on-site and online, is what's that next series you're calling people back to, the next message. So you'll get a lot of people that'll come out to Easter out of obligation, right? It's usually the wife, and she's telling her husband, this is the one service you got to come with me. They get the whole family dressed up, and they come on out to church. Now that you have them, because someone has manipulated them to church and twisted their arm, and they finally got there, either watching it in their living room or at a campus, what are you saying? Hey, this is great. We're so glad you're here today. More importantly, we want you to come back next weekend or to watch on demand sometime next week as we go into this. That is the other low-hanging fruit as you get into Easter for the lead pastors. We still got time to execute that. That's my first thing that I would really strongly push.
Yeah, that's awesome because you're forward thinking there, and you're going to saying, hey, you're not just focused about Easter, but how can you get them back, coming back the following week? Mark, what would you add on this?
Yeah, I mean, Ben, that's so good because oftentimes we lose sight of the things that are urgently tugging at us, and we forget that, okay, it's part of a much bigger thing. And I would even take a step back, even past, away from that, and think, okay, let's look holistically at the full church calendar. What does Easter mean to your church calendar? And then where does it, what role does it play? And I think that oftentimes we have to, we know Easter's really, really important, but as we're progressing towards Easter, there's going to be a ton of things that you think, oh man, I wish we had this in place, or I wish we had that in place. And, I'm a real practical, to-do list person. And I constantly have lists of things that have to get done. And I think that similar to, the best time to make a Christmas list of what you want to give others is at Christmas time, because as people are opening gifts and people are looking at stuff and they mention something, you think, oh yeah, I could give that to them next year. Well, the best time to create a list for Easter, and maybe not this Easter, but next Easter, is right now. So what I would do is, as you think of things, you might, what Ben said was, okay, so what can you get done now and what can you do later? Well, I would start making a list of the things that you see as a huge hole that it would really benefit you to have this in the future. And And I'm, on my to-do list, I always list everything, and sometimes it's okay, this needs to be done now, and this needs to be done later. So I just write next to stuff now, later, and then I go back through all of my nows and add a number next to it. So it's now 1, now 2, now 3, and I just prioritize what needs to be done. The good thing about that, and you can even go to the next level where, right next to it, can you do this by yourself, or does this have to be in involvement of somebody else? And then you also want to take a look and say, okay, so how much time is involved for me? And then you can take a look and say, okay, if it's going to take 2 hours and the next one's going to take 3 hours, well, that's 5 hours out of a day. Most people can't get 5 hours out of a day with all the interruptions that they have. So you can take a step back and really look at your day and say, okay, so realistically, what can I get done? But the best thing about this list is this is a list that you need to take to your leadership and just say, so here's what I see prioritizing for now, and here's what I see prioritizing for later. Do you agree with this? And then that way everyone gets on the same page. And then you can also, it's a great time to say, so all these things for later, can you help me make an expectation level of when we should get this done? And is there some support capital money to be able to hire somebody to help me do these things, or is the expectation that we're going to be doing it all internally? And there's just never a better time to get it all out on the table. It might not happen in the flurry leading up into Easter. Like don't walk in and start saying, hey, we want to have a forward planning meeting when there's 2 minutes to Easter. But it's just a really good time for you to understand, okay, how have we dropped the ball in the past, and how can we make sure we pick it up for the future?
So, Mark, I believe it or not, I've read all 800 articles that you've written. It took me a long time, but I made through it. It was like War and Peace. Now, here's my question. Cut to the chase for me. So I love the list. I'm a big list guy as well. But what is the most egregious thing off that list as you coach churches towards Easter, and you see people forget again and again to put on their list?
Oh my goodness! And the thing is that what you were talking about the knowing what your next thing is. Oftentimes, people are constantly thinking, okay, so you know the message, so you tell me what the next thing is. If you don't tell people specifically what that next thing is, there's going to be a ton of things that is their takeaway message. And when it comes to simplifying message, I mean, that's what, as a church, we just have so many complex messages. And I would on that list say, okay, realistically, what is the simple messaging that has to occur around Easter? And whenever I'm talking about simplicity of messaging, I know I talk to a lot of churches about what I call a relationship journey, or it's a sales funnel, or however you want to call it. But ultimately, people have needs, and you have to raise the awareness of it. Then there needs to be an urgency of making a decision, and then there has to be some choices so that they can consider it. And then there's the decision-making process, which the decision-making process is just eliminating barriers or risk. And so you need to start thinking, so where is my audience? Is it that they need to be aware of what the Easter, our Easter messaging is going to be about? Or is it about creating urgency? Or is it about saying, so here are the choices you're going to have when you come to our Easter services? Or is it eliminating some barriers so that people will actually come? So I mean, on your list, you need to be very clear about what that next step is going to be, and then how do you move people from where they are to where they should be.
Yeah. Purpose. We're doing this to celebrate Jesus, but beyond that, what are we intentionally doing to help them become a disciple of Christ?
I guess, Ben, how do you, in your role, I guess, how do you get, because there's always a complexity. Like even sermons that are 3 points sometimes can feel very complex. How much leeway are you given in order to simplify that and create, companionship communication?
The lead pastor is going to do what they're going to do. So at the end of the day, and even if you're coaching them towards simplifying their message and their big idea, and even if they work on their message points, the Holy Spirit's going to grab a hold of them and they're going to go a little rogue. So I don't spend a lot of time in relationship to that, but I spend a lot of time in the things I can control in terms of the marketing and the communication leading up to it, and then all the aggressive follow-up afterwards. So even if the lead pastor may have had 2 or 3 or 18 different calls to action in their message, what you can do as I don't know how many people listening in are that lead pastor, and I'm not trying to throw them under the bus, but if you are support to them, you have a lot of leverage and a lot of leeway in terms of how you pick their main idea, and as you're communicating and following up, keeping that crystal clear and very simple for the guest experience. Hey, Mark, I'm just going to reset the room really quick for those who jumped in. We're talking about how we're planning and preparing for this upcoming Easter season for churches of any size, and most importantly, on-site and online. If you got a question, raise your hand. We'd love to take it instead of Mark and I just going at it here back and forth. But Mark, let me go. Let me push us towards a conversation of online, because I think by and large the church has done a fairly good job of executing Easter on site, right? And then the last Easter season, the majority of us put our worst foot forward because it was our first foot forward for Easter online. But we've been at this for a year now. So what would you say are some best practices that churches need to do for Easter online with 32 days left?
Well, and most people are doing some type of hybrid service so that there's, it's on site as well as online. And I think that the hardest part for the church has always been, does their online presence look the same or feel the same as their on-site presence? And we've been doing on-site for so long. Most churches, dabbled in online stuff, and I think that you have to make sure you lock down the experience. And what I see oftentimes is that the church somewhat talks down about that online audience. If you can't make it to one of our services, then you can go online. And what we need to make sure we do is we elevate that online presence to the same effort that we would have in person. And I mean, you all, you do a great job making sure that the online feel is the same as in person. I guess, do you have specific steps that or check boxes that you need to do to make sure that the experience is the same?
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because a lot of churches are across the board in terms of, I think we're, to be clear, the first thing you need to evaluate is where your church is in relationship to the online experience. Is it better than your on-site experience? Most churches would say no. I'd say there's probably a handful of those across the country would say, like, yeah, we're putting more eggs into that basket there. A lot would say it's kind of on par. It's different, but it's equal to their on-site experience. And then some would say it is a nice supplementary, but it is, and they probably wouldn't articulate it as inferior, but their communication would, right? So it's like, hey, come on site, and by the way, we got this streaming thing, blah, 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 blah. And they would give it, they would undersell it. For us, we try to reverse that paradigm just because we know we have the majority of our audience and our eyeballs and engagement still right now online. We reopened back in October, but we roughly have about 40% of the attendance pre-COVID. Because a lot of our people the majority of our people are still online. And so for us, the implications of that is how we prioritize things. Whenever you start a list, right? My wife gives me a shopping list. Get milk, get eggs, and bread. Well, I know the most important thing is milk. If I forget the other two, it's because she's already prioritized the list for me. So in our communication, we prioritize that as well. So we say, first of all, we'd love for you to experience the resurrection of Jesus online. We got great live experiences where you can chat about that, or you can catch it at your convenience on demand throughout the week. In addition, if you're here in Miami and you want to go to a physical location, we got those too. So right there, I framed the most important thing for us and our audience as we're pushing people towards online. And then in addition to that, we got on-site as well. So you need to, before you do the communication, you have to do the philosophy. So philosophically, where are we in relationship to this model? And then making sure your communication matches that. Because I've seen a lot of churches will say one thing and do different. Online, it's our biggest campus. It's our most important campus. And I cannot find a link for it anywhere. Or your lead pastor is still looking at their own and is not looking at the camera when they communicates. So just making sure your philosophy and your communication are aligned is like the first low-hanging fruit for that.
Well, and I always think that people need to really look at their communication and say, so who is that communication for? Every church that I talk to, they all say, well, oh my goodness, we just would love if our community would come. But then you look at their messaging, and their messaging is like way over the heads of their community. And it's not going to be something that will actually attract them to their church. And I think that every church needs to make sure that that they're talking to their community. As a communications person, I would strongly urge somebody to, go out and talk to your community. See what Easter means to them. And what I'm always amazed at when I talk to the community, I do focus groups for churches across the country, and I talk to the quote unquote unchurched, and things that, like, little concepts that I just know are, I think everyone would probably know that. I'm amazed at how many people don't know it, and it goes over their heads, and it's not, the communication isn't directed towards them as a soft sell of why they would even want to go to church.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hey, Tom, I know you're moderating this, but don't ghost on me, man. Jump back into this conversation.
It's hard to jump back in when you guys are just talking total truth. I do have a question for you guys. I want to ask you guys, and then I want to get Justin in here to talk. But the question is, how do you prioritize? I'm hearing you guys talk about priority, and we've got 32 days left to Easter. How do you focus on priority and saying what can we do now, or what should we push off to next year? Because Mark, I heard you talk a little bit about next year. Like, let's start planning for next year. What is it? I mean, because Easter is a stressful time for all pastors and all ministers, and because you do so much. But what is it that will say this needs to happen this year, or this can wait till next year?
That's a great question. The one thing I would push towards next year, just because you probably don't have time to execute it well, is that strong callback series. So I mentioned, having something that you can say that is probably going to touch some of the felt needs of your first-time guests. So not necessarily a study in Habakkuk, but maybe something that pushes into the stress and anxiety that we've all felt in a year of a global pandemic. So something that hits a felt need. But here's the thing. We oftentimes spend all of our creative juice, all of our communication juice, pushing people towards Easter. And we have nothing left in the tank for what is happening after Easter. So churches still may have a little bit of margin left to execute that, but generally speaking, your plan is pretty much locked and loaded. You've moved away from the brainstorming session, and you're now in the execution mode. And so I don't know if a lot of churches have time to go back to that drawing table and saying, wow, yeah, we didn't think what that is. We don't have a compelling content. We don't have a compelling theme or a blurb or a graphic or a bumper video or a testimonial or any of those things that might compel people back to the following weekend. So that's one of those things that you may need to push towards next year if you haven't done it already.
Well, and I would also say, if you look at your website and you go, man, that website just sucks, this is probably not the time to decide to do a brand new website. I mean, you can look at your team and say, oh, so do they have the bandwidth to be able to do this? Do we have the time to be able to do it? And then realize, okay, well, we need a new website, but we can't do it right now. So let's push that to later. Well, then on the, you might write later next to that, but then you got to take a step back and say, so website's pretty important. What is that next step that we're driving people towards? And if they decide, whether it's online or in person, that I'm going to take that next step, well, what if it is, okay, do you really want to have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ? If someone Googles you and calls up your website, we have to make sure that we're connecting the dots, because oftentimes we just talk it out at a service and say, yeah, just contact us. If you need to, go to our website. And then people go to the website and it's like, well, what do I do now? And so we have to make sure that we're connecting those dots now, but then also take a look at, okay, so how can we have done this better with our website or with social media or whatever it's going to be.
Mark, are you saying like an overhauled church brand is not a wise idea to do in the next 32 days? Is that not? I had it on my to-do. It was on my list. You said make a list. I put it on there.
Well, if you talk to Tom, I'm sure Tom could do that for you.
No, see, that's why I'm glad we have Justin in here right now. Justin is my guy that I talk to about web stuff and SEO stuff. So, Justin, what would you add to this conversation, or what question do you have or thought?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me up. First of all, thanks, Tom, for inviting me to this. 'Cause I was Jeff Reed was here earlier. He's not here anymore. But anyways, yeah, glad to be here. So about the website, 100% that your website is how people are going to learn about you and they're going to find you. And even word of mouth is no longer just word of mouth. It's word of mouth that is then verified by the website. So if people hear that, you went to this church on Easter and they think, well, maybe I should go to church either on Easter or after Easter, and they Google you or Bing you or whatever, and they look at your website and say, yikes, or that's great for my friend, but not for me. That's an issue. That's an obstacle. The website is no longer just promoting your church and your services, but also removing all obstacles to getting people to connect with you, whatever that first step might be. So 100%, like if you need my thing, like going back to practicality, we're 30 something days out. If your church website is lacking and you want to be found a little bit more, but you don't have the resources to hire someone like our agency or just to do it yourself, then a one-page Easter website is totally doable. But you got to kind of follow that up. You don't want to create that great first impression and then follow it up with, okay, well, I guess they're only worth attending, or they're only care about connecting on Easter. So it is, you do have to take kind of a high-level approach, but there are some small practical things you can do where it's kind of that put 20% effort in to get 80% of the results.
Yeah, and I would suggest as well, like just on your website, make sure if one of the next things, the next steps would be, as Ben was saying, that if you find yourself in our area and you would like to come to church, make sure you come to our, one of our locations. Make sure that that's on the homepage someplace so that they can find it really easy. And then probably the next page that they're going to go to is your team page, your staff page, and just make sure that people are dressed in clothes that you can actually purchase today. That's my nicest way of saying like, just people want to see themselves on that page. If everybody looks the same, if everybody's old, if everybody is all male and there's no females on there, like people just want to be able to say, I will fit into that group because I look like the leadership, or the leadership looks like me. So do whatever you can to upgrade that. I would say in the next 30 days, if there's one thing you fix on your website, probably want to put something on your homepage that leads people to that next step that's going to be in the sermon. But then you also want to go into your team page and just make sure that it's up to date and people can contact the people that they need to. And that's probably, okay, lastly about that is just make sure that next to your team players, make sure that all of the things that anybody in your community would actually want would be listed there. And I would almost say alphabetized based upon that. So it's like, student ministries is the big thing, and then, how to contact somebody about it.
Mark, I love the fact that you're calling out what are the missed opportunities on the website. I kind of feel I need to rewind the clock here just a bit and acknowledge that Justin referenced Bing. I don't know the last time I've heard that, Justin, but thank you for bringing up.
I'm all inclusive, baby.
Way to reach all people for the sake of the gospel. I love that. Mark, you hit on that. Like, what are the, in terms of the website, we talked about what was missing on the list from your perspective. You just hit what is oftentimes missed on the website there. Since Justin's up here as well, Justin, I'd love to hear from you. What do you also find to be the biggest miss on a website when a first-time guest is going there to try to find out information about the church?
Great question. It's all going to come down to calls to action. There's a lot of information as far as what we do, and there's not a lot of telling people to go ahead and take that next step. You hear this echoed everywhere, Mark. I'm sure this is a horse you've beaten many times, but people want to be told what to do. You go to any e-commerce site, you see a buy now button. You go to any Shopify site, shop now. You go to Apple, they want you to look at their products. Everyone tells you what to do, except for churches. We just hope that you do something. And so we need to call them to action. On the website, Mark talked about doing giving them the clear next steps. We'll tell them, take the next step. Plan your visit, watch a sermon, RSVP, claim your gift, let us know you're coming, call a leader, something like that. That's just very simple. Every next step looks different for every church. But that's the biggest missed opportunity is we just throw information out there and hope someone does something. They want to be told what to do. People go to websites to find out how to connect and how to get involved. So for some reason, the church world is just so far behind on that. And that's the biggest missed opportunity is just guiding people through your website. Just like we have a greeter ministry or first impressions ministry that guides people from the parking lot to the foyer to the kids ministry to their seats. We need to guide them on a journey to take the actions we want them to take on our websites.
Yeah, and Justin, I would add, make sure that that you have an easy way to give, and don't be scared to ask for somebody to enter into the worship of giving. And Justin, I would love to hear from you because I always get pushback because everyone always says, yes, but we have given our main menu and no one ever clicks on it. And I guess that what would you say to them? I know what we typically challenge them about, but is it good enough for the church just to have a give in their menu?
Boy, Mark, that's a great question, and I might go against the grain here, but it's going to come down to first impression, right? So I know Donald Miller, he talks about putting a big donate, big give, big buy now button in the top right. I view that as your big call to action. And personally, and talking to other non-churchy people, because we work with a lot of churches that want to reach the far from Jesus, the unchurched, de-churched, burned by church, former churched. When they see that big give button highlighted in yellow flashing at them, that's kind of like someone approaching you in the store and saying, hey, you're the pastor of that church. Oh, man, my marriage is falling apart. My kids don't listen to me. What do I do with my life? What am I here for? And then you say, hey, would you like to donate to our church? Like, whoa, we would never do that in person. And so we want to make sure we don't do that online. Now, every church, like I said, every church is different, right? So some churches, giving is a very intimate act of worship. There's a reason why they still pass the plate instead of having a box to drop your gift off on the way out. Some churches do well with the box on the way out. Some churches do better with the plate coming around, because that's a literal physical act of worship rather than a second thought. So every church is going to be uniquely different. That said, if that is important to you and you want to make it easy, and you do a good job communicating through your give button, where like it takes you to a page and they can see the budget breakdown. Hey, 40% of everything goes right back into our community. 20% supports our people. 20% supports our missionaries, and you show actual action items of not just saying we do the work of God, but showing we fed this many orphans, we clothed this many. You don't clothe widows, but you supported this many widows, and you provided this many backpacks and this many shoe boxes, and you bought this many bus tickets and filled this many gas tanks and provided this how many pounds or tons of food to the community. People see that and get excited and realize that you are on the move, and they will give to that. So if you do put the give button, you got to send it to a place where they can see what they're giving to. That not only does that open up the checkbook, but it increases the amount of the donation. If you do feel a little bit tacky with that obvious big give button, I don't blame you. Like, I would rather the first call to action be something more relational than transactional. So it could work either way. It's just you got to evaluate what your church is, and then also evaluate the context in which it's asked. Obviously, you're going to have a give button in the navigation menu. You're going to ask people to give throughout the website strategically. You might even have a special URL or something like that to give. But I do push back. Like, I understand the importance of a give button, but is that going to be the first thing you want people to see, is asking for something, especially asking for money, before we get to the relational part of who the church is?
I totally agree. Ben, what do you have to add to that?
First of all, I don't know why we need to call the action buttons Justin and Mark. We have the Holy Spirit who convicts people. Why? So the tongue is firmly planted in cheek, right? So I think that's one of the things we struggle with, where I don't need to do that, because the Holy Spirit, that's the Holy Spirit's job. Which, yes, the Holy Spirit will convict, but like, man, let's make that on-ramp super easy for people to take those actions, to take that next spiritual step in their journey by making that big button wherever we want to put it, on site and online, available for people. So that, yeah, I concur. I'm here to echo what you guys are saying. I concur with that. Hey, let me push into maybe some best practices, Tom, for, we're talking about Easter, right? Like things that we can still get done.
Yeah.
Follow up with first-time guests. That's a big thing, right? First-time guests are here. Again, how are we engaging with these people, other than just hoping they come to our website and smash that give button?
Yeah, we like to do the digital connection cards. We found real success in digital connection cards, especially over the course of COVID. And what's been happening is that, again, we don't have in-person connection cards anymore. We have a digital connection card that they can either type in text the number from Texan Church, or we also have a QR code that does the exact same thing. And so that's been a really great way for us to capture information and then be able to follow up with them for our next big thing, or way to get them more involved. So that's one of the things that we do. What do you guys do?
Tom, how many things do you have on that card for someone to fill out?
Too many.
I'm gonna ask that.
Too many. I'll tell you right now, too many.
Yes, please, let's talk about that, because we've actually just reevaluated our card, and it's going to be very simple. So talk to us about that, guys.
If it doesn't look like a W-2 tax document, is it even a Connect card?
Well, and the thing is that oftentimes you have to start with, okay, what is the cost for filling something out? And if someone looks at something and thinks, oh, that's going to take me a little bit extra time, they're not going to fill it out. And so you have to think about your follow-up. What is the absolute minimum that you need in order to be able to follow up? And for the most part today, you're going to probably follow up by email. So you just need a name and an email, and that's about it.
Yeah, I would also put the cell on there, because I think the open rate for most email campaigns is relatively low. It's in like the 20s or 30s, where the open rate on a cell phone is much higher. It's in the 80s or 90s. And I don't even put anything else. I just put cell. I don't want your home. I don't want your landline. that's meaningless to me. I want to be able to text you because I know I'm going to have a much higher open rate on that. Now I need to be careful and not spam you, which a lot of churches do that, right? Wow, we got this glorious cell phone number that we can hit up people whenever we want, and that gets pretty invasive. But I would do the email, and in addition to that, Mark, I would definitely hit up the cell as well.
Hey, I'm a big fan of. We just like to do the two fields. But what we do is instead of name, email, phone, we say name and then text or email, or they can pick. It's just a blank line. They can put their email or they can put their phone number. That tells us which contact method they prefer, and then from there, usually on that next call, we train people. If it's a call or a text, tell them, hey, I want to send you this information. What's your email? And then, or if it's an email, hey, by the way, a pastor wants to talk to you and to see how we can serve your family. What's your phone number? And then from there, on that next call, we get their address and we build it out from there. So we can slowly, what's the phrase? Like, you don't throw a frog in boiling water, you put it in water and then you slowly bring it up to a boil. So that's not the best illusion for this, but we really want to slowly bathe our brand and our church around these people, so we're not hounding them. And really the key, and we can talk about this later if we want to stay with the Connect card, is following up through multiple avenues and not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, and knowing what you're going to do in that follow-up. Like, if somebody signs up and puts their name on a card or a digital sign-up sheet, what is it that they actually want? And it's interesting because I just did a focus group with a church, and I talked to a lot of people who said, well, I go to the guest services area and they tell me what I need, and all they need to do is ask me what I want. And I think that we need to be really sensitive that everybody comes for a different reason. And in those follow-up calls or emails, I think that we talk too much and we don't ask enough questions.
Ben was flashing his mute button. I didn't know if that meant he wanted to go next.
Oh, no, that's just affirming what Mark was saying. It's just a small way to say, I agree with him instead of cutting him off. So, no, just affirming that. This is like really granular, but it's like the bane of my existence with the data team at our church, is whatever your connection card is, if you have a physical, if you're still handing out physical ones, which are fine, just make sure you don't have a blank line, but instead you have blocks where people put in things. Because if it forces people to, within those squares, their phone number or the letters of their name, which makes it a lot more legible, which is the biggest problem with connection cards that are handwritten, that we found half the data is unusable because it's unreadable. And you got to force people, give them big blocks, but force them to write their name out in each of those squares will make it more legible, and that you're actually using the right name or the right Gmail address, whatever it might be.
Yeah, hey, we just invited Adam McLaughlin up here. Adam's a great friend. I know all of us know him. But I just want to reset the room real quick. We've got about 20 minutes left of what the time we wanted to commit. So if you've got questions, by all means, raise your hand and ask. Feel free. We'd love to answer questions. But also know that you guys can connect with Ben and Mark and Justin and Adam, even myself, if you want to connect with me down the road. And these guys are great on answering questions on social media. So
I do have a question for you, Tom, whenever we get to that point.
Oh, okay. Adam, talk to us, Adam, real quick before we pivot to do some on-site stuff.
Hey, sorry, I didn't mean to try and be a speaker. I was just pressing buttons because Clubhouse for the first time. I'm also here because I just love Mark MacDonald's East Coast Canada accent, and I just couldn't get enough of it. So I have a question for Mark, and that is, can you just go ahead and talk about something? But anyway, that's a joke. Hey, everybody. Excited to see Easter is coming up, and looking forward to hearing all of what churches are doing with both online and physical. and excited that this year at least we get a little bit more time to know that that's coming, rather than last year Easter was almost imposed upon us as both. And so I'm curious to see what churches do differently this year when they know it's coming compared to when it's kind of sprung on us. So anyway, that's why I'm here, just hanging out. It's all good.
Thanks, Adam. We're glad you're here. Okay, so let's pivot a little bit to in-person and on-site gathering. We talked a lot about online stuff. So what would you guys recommend here as we're preparing for Easter 32 days away?
If you haven't grabbed a photo booth yet, do it now. Again, you got a sense from me. All my ideas ultimately push back towards online, just because I think that's a lemon. A lemon we haven't used all the juice out as a church. And so the photo booth is nice at your on-site experiences, but it has a huge benefit online because people take photos and then they post it. Hopefully they at you or hashtag your church and get the word out and get free marketing there. It's very inexpensive for churches, so this works for the large, medium, and small size. You can put a bench and a couple of ferns. It could be like between two ferns. You just need to put that out, and then people will sit there and take photos. You grab that basic ring light you've been using in your home studio for the past year, and there you go. You got a professional setup. It's clear value add for your guests, and again, free marketing. So that's one of the easiest things I encourage churches to do with 30 days left.
Ben, what do you think, though? I've seen churches do it where, here, let me take your phone, I'll take a picture of you. And then there's others that have the professional setup from the church, and then we'll email it to you.
Yeah. Great question. So what I like the best is you get a volunteer with gloves. And so, we feel a degree of safety, but they're there positioned to take photos of you on your phone for a couple of reasons. The professional thing is nice. It was really helpful 10 years ago when our cell phones sucked, but the quality of images that we can get on our phones is so good now. And the other more important thing is I don't need to take this extra step in getting your email address and sending it to you sometime down the week. And then hopefully you posting it on Wednesday, you have it on your phone and you're posting it as you're walking out the parking lot, which is way better. So that's helpful. Get a volunteer, put gloves on them, and have them take photos. The other nice thing too is they move the line. So I've seen this where it's it could be one family and they're doing different arrangements, and the line's getting long just because there isn't someone, the nice guest who moves people along. So that's the other benefit of doing it that way.
Well, and I'm all about church branding, but I think that there's a tension point about not branding it at all and having just a little bit of branding in it so that people understand. I think that most people, when they post the picture, are going to say, I'm at such and such church, or, our family went to church, and tag you in it. What are your thoughts on that?
We did, man, you're going to laugh. And I still don't know if it's a good idea, if it's the best idea we've had or the worst. It's one of the two. It's got to be on the extremes. But we had as a prop, a cardboard cutout of our lead pastor. He used it in his message. And we're like, wouldn't that be funny if we just put it out there by the regular photo booth as a lark? And here's the thing. Everyone went to that and posed with a cardboard cutout of the lead pastor. And they thought it was hilarious. And no one used our nice, Lowe's setup background. And again, I don't know if it just seemed very narcissistic to have everyone posing with the lead pastor, but that got the most buzz that we've ever done.
It would be interesting if you had the ability to do the two styles and then see which one the majority of people wanted to use.
We did. Nobody used our nice wood bench with the ferns. Nobody.
That's funny.
That is awesome.
So everybody, in the next 31 days, you better take a good picture of your pastor and make a full-size cutout of him.
Here's the deal. I just remember last year, too, because, again, our Easter service had to go all online. We weren't able to meet in person, and it just was so weird and eerie And I just have a sense right now we're starting to see more people come in person now. I think for those people that are able to meet in person, I think having a setup like a photo booth could be a real win, because it's still very doable within 32 days to do it. And like you said, Ben, it's a simple setup. You don't need an elaborate setup. And it's something very doable, and people want to get out. They want to dress up for Easter and get out with other people.
Yeah, and I think that at this stage, though, we just be careful that you don't have even a bench. A bench right now requires somebody to spray it down in between or wipe it off. I would have a stand-up booth.
Yeah. That's super helpful. The one thing I would encourage, we're talking like on site now. This is in terms of your marketing. You got 30 days. Your marketing, your communication leading up to it. We have been open since October, and like the month leading up to it, the phrase that I got nauseated because we were saying it so often, which is a sign of good communication, was we are safe, spacious, and sanitized. So a lot of churches, if they've been opened up for that season, they probably have stepped off in that communication, assuming that the majority of the guests realize that. But as you're leading into promoting your on-site campus or campuses, you need to double down on that again, because you're going to have guests who are on the fence. They're trying to get out for the first time, and they're saying, I don't know if I'm going to come do that church thing. So you got to remind them that you are following the best protocols from our health officials, and that you're following your local governmental officials and what they are mandating for you as well. If not, you're going to lose a lot of potential people just because they are nervous.
Yeah, and I would also add that, I mean, you have 3 Sundays between now and then. I would put on the glasses of your community on a Sunday morning and come in when the majority of people come in, which is about 10 to 15 minutes before, and really go through your entire campus and really take a look at it, not as a person who works there, not as a person who attends on a regular basis, but what would be confusing to them, and then what would be a feeling of unsafe. And oftentimes we funnel people into very small spaces into our churches, and we just have to be very careful and make sure that as well, if someone shows up without a mask and you want people to wear masks, you should have some masks available, and where's the best place to offer those so it doesn't feel like it's a ticket for the entry.
This idea off of you, I just talked with the church in Illinois, I think, that's doing this on a regular Sunday, but as we're talking about cautiousness and Easter and all that, I'm in Texas, so we're about half and half. Half of us are just ready to live free and sit on benches as much as we want. The other half are still very extremely cautious. Let me bounce this idea off of you, and this is literally the first time I kind of connected the two. What about having, if you do have 2 services, promoting one as a cautious service, where you do the social distance, you require a mask, you sanitize it intentionally before and do all this stuff, and then you have a more open service, whatever you would call it, normal service, where you're a little bit more relaxed, if your state allows, if your local governance allows. This church is doing it, and they're finding a lot of people come in the 9:30 service, and they're very glad that they can get out and be safe. And the other half of their people are very glad to come out and be a little bit more on the normal side. What do y'all think about that as an idea?
I think it's going to be hard for you to get people to go for different time frames based upon that preference. I think that it's a great idea. Like, if you have a balcony and you can socially distance people in your balcony, maybe close the balcony for those people who, for I don't even know how you would word it, but for those people who are ultra cautious, you can go up there.
That's good. Hey, Tom, I'm probably have to dip out of the conversation a bit, but there's definitely one thing I want to hit as we're talking about critical church Easter prep. We've been talking about some planning and some promotion. The one area that I know for myself that I oftentimes underserve is the last P. I'm a good Christian, I like to alliterate, is on the praying end. And that's where I try to challenge myself, my teams, and other church leaders that I interact with, as you're going into the season, you got 32 days left. Make sure that this experience is not just planned and promoted, but it's prayed over as well. And when I say prayed over, oftentimes it's not even the quote-unquote success of the experience and that we would see a huge growth at our church, but oftentimes it's for myself as well, that I as a church leader would realize that God is on the move. He wants to do a work in my congregation and community, and that he is going to make sure his name is honored and glorified and not give his glory to another. And I just need to be faithful in executing what he's done to me, and I need to leave the results in his hands. So oftentimes that prayer isn't solely just for the guest. It's also for myself as a church leader, that I'm going into the spirit of resurrection power with the right heart attitude. That God is going to continue to raise up the dead into life. And he's just asking for me to participate in it. So that's the last thing I would say as church leaders. I have 32 days left to go. Don't forget that last piece. Don't forget to pray over this and for your heart posture going into it. And if you have staff and volunteers reporting to you, which I'm sure we all do, they're looking to that spirit for you to take that spiritual lead and that spiritual dependency on God, and for it to exude out of you over these next 32 days.
And that's interesting, Ben, because so I had my list of things I didn't alliterate, so obviously I'm not as good at it.
Shame.
I know, but my last thing was take an honest look at you, and I mean, we've just come through an extraordinary year. There's other words that we could use for extraordinary, and I'm sure you put them all into play at this stage. But really take a hard look at you. You're in ministry, and if you're not making sure that you're ready for Easter, it's awfully hard to get other people ready for Easter. So I would really commit some time. It sounds really crazy. 5, 10, 15 minutes a day. Read through the Easter story. Make sure that you're prepared for this, and then also prepare yourself for the aftermath. Trust God that he's going to do a mighty work. And if you're ready for this, who knows? Maybe all of this is just about you and making sure that you're ready, and just don't miss out on that.
Yeah, this is a great word to end on, honestly, because I shared the story with Ben before, because we did talk about prayer a while back, and we had a pastor from India come over and look at some North American churches, and he came to visit us and our church and some other churches. And as he was leaving, our pastor asked him, what did you learn from this experience? And he said, it's amazing what you guys can do without praying. And so, yes, we need to work hard. We need to act hard, but we really need to give it over to the Lord and ask him to do that, to take care of it. And again, work in our lives, but also do the work, because it's God who changes hearts, not all the fancy stuff that we do to prepare.
For sure. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, you go ahead.
Well, no, because it's interesting how many things, I'm a task person. I'm a goal-oriented person. I like to set goals. In order for, if Easter is your biggest thing on your church calendar, I'm sure that somebody has some huge goals that are in play. Just make sure that you have the right perspective of your goals. Because Tom, what you said is that it's not, God doesn't say, if you only accomplish just a few more things today, then I'll show up. Well, he can show up without you doing anything. And I think that we all need to make sure, take a breath. Yes, we're going to get through this. And we just want to make sure that we pray through it, so that it's not accomplishing the things that we have on our list, but accomplishing the things that God has for your Easter service.
That is great. And so anybody else have any final thoughts as we kind of wrap up?
I'll just say, we get really wrapped up in our own world, whether you're a pastor praying on your knees and planning and preparing, and whatever other P you want to do. And even if you're support staff, youth pastor, director, administrative communications, we get so wrapped up in our own world that we forget how many of us it actually takes to make happen. And so just as you pray for your guests coming as well, also pray for your staff and your volunteer teams and your lay leaders, and just check in with them and just say, hey, is there anything, do you have everything you need? Is there anything else you're missing? Make sure that they're taken care of. If they're working 12-hour days in the days up to Easter, and I'm talking mainly about the media crew at that point, or production crew, make sure that you follow up with them, ideally in the way that in their love language, whether you give, high five, give them time, give them attention, and just support them in any way that you can. And even if you can't, find a way for someone else to support them in the way that they need. Just let's not forget about the people around us, as well as it is a team effort.
That's so good. I know that I'm amazed at how many stressful situations where everyone's trying to get so much stuff done. I know how much it disarms that whole, like it just creates peace just to be able to say to somebody, I see you're busy. Is there anything I can do to help you? And oftentimes you'll get a, no, I don't think so. But what it does is it just says, I'm part of the team and I understand.
That's great. Well, hey, thanks everyone for being with us. George, I tried to invite you up to speak, and because I saw your hand raised, but for some reason it's not letting you come on. So I apologize for that.
I'm actually up. I don't know.
Oh, you are? Oh. Okay, George, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I know y'all are ready to wrap up, but if you had a quick piece of advice when it comes to putting on an egg hunt, I would be very interested. This is our first egg hunt as a church. We're doing a glow-in-the-dark egg hunt, and so some of the things that we're thinking through right now are both COVID safe practices and promoing into the community. So if y'all had any quick words of advice on either of those, I'd be super thankful.
It's funny because the very first church that I ever worked for, they asked me to do an Easter egg hunt for them, and it was in Atlantic Canada, and the pastor could dream so big. And I remember him saying one day, okay, we don't want to do just a regular Easter egg hunt. Let's do the world's largest Easter egg hunt. So we coordinated with Guinness Book of World Records, and then we realized we needed to have 250,000 eggs. And we all looked at each other and thought, there's no freaking way. We don't even have the budget for it. And the pastor said, let me call Hershey. So he called Hershey, and in one day we had Hershey Canada donate 250,000 Easter eggs to us.
Wow.
And so we set it up, and it became a regional event, because if you try to hide 250,000 eggs, you can't do that in a church building. As we discovered when we plotted it all out, we ended up going to the city, and we asked them to let us take over a park, and they ended up giving us the entire downtown. And so they closed Main Street, and we were able, this church was able to put on the world's largest Easter egg hunt. And the night before, it snowed 10 inches of snow.
Oh my gosh.
So, needless to say, again, God will show up in mysterious ways. We were shaking our heads, and it was a disaster, to tell you the truth, mainly because the media also showed up because they wanted to see. We had over 10,000 people come. But if you do the math, 10,000 people, if they get 250,000 Easter eggs, there's not a lot of Easter eggs, but a lot of people showed up with large bags. And there were the next day in the newspaper, the front page, almost a quarter of the front page was a person with hundreds and hundreds of Easter eggs, and a smaller picture of a child crying because they couldn't find any.
Oh gosh! Wow, that's awesome. So sorry about that.
Yeah. in my book, I spell out from top to bottom all the things that I learned through that. But the one thing is you can never over prepare. Make sure that you've walked through it as many times as possible, and make sure you have enough volunteers, because that's how, I mean, we just weren't prepared for what actually happened.
Hey, George, from my perspective, real quick, from a social media perspective, is I would definitely create a Facebook event for you at your church, or that you could share it and encourage people in your congregation to share it to other people, and to get, like, in our area, there's a bunch of community, like, Facebook community pages. I would get on all the people to share it to the community page, and use that as an opportunity to share.
That's good. I would certainly recommend getting as many as possible and getting feedback. I would recommend trying, like, on all those community pages, getting people in your community to doing that, not your church necessarily. The more you can get it to go viral, where it feels like everyone's talking about it rather than just the church, that would be key.
Yeah, I agree. Justin, do you have something to say? I think we're losing Justin.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Okay, go ahead, Justin.
Okay, there we go. I think it was my AirPod. I was just going to also chime in on the Easter egg hunt. I love the idea of getting a community. I love the idea of really promoting the heck out of it. And if you want to go for 250,001 eggs, I would like to see that as well. But as a parent who goes to these things every year, it's not enough. It really isn't enough just to promote the mess out of it and get everyone there. You got to make sure it's good. So just some basic Easter egg stuff. As a parent of a 3-year-old, I don't want her fighting 7 or 8-year-olds to get an egg. So yeah, I like it when the egg hunts are separated by age. Obviously, name brand candy, don't cheap out. I see a lot of churches cheap out, and it's not a good experience, and they wonder why people don't come back. It's because you're giving away the cheap knockoff candy or the Mexican spicy candy that no one wants. And make sure that you have some kind of connection process or follow-up process, whether it's like a check-in for a raffle, or extra eggs or extra candy, or maybe a full-size candy bar if you just trade your info, something that you can use that to follow up. Because you will have, and maybe it's just a Texas thing, but if you do an Easter egg hunt even right after service, you'll have people that show up at 12 o'clock just for the Easter egg hunt, because that's what they do. They go around hunting, kind of like the trunk or treat. So you want to make sure that you don't only market the mess out of it, but you also provide a memorable experience, but then also have a way to somehow follow up. And you're not going to get everyone, but if you have some way that you can get some people, that's going to make it even more valuable for you as a church.
That's great.
Thank you.
This has been awesome. And George, I know we follow each other on Twitter and stuff, and all these guys are on Twitter, so feel free, anybody who's got follow-up questions, connect with the bios, and then we can do follow up offline on that, or actually online on Twitter. So hey, this has been fun. I appreciate you guys doing this and participating in this. This was a good thing, and we're planning on probably doing some more of these, so thanks for everyone for doing this.